you. Walked in and dream came true for you. Soft skin and not perfume for you. Yes, I know I'm melting to it for you. Yes, that morning coffee brewed for you. Yes, one touch and I'm brand new for you. Now he's thinking about me every night. Oh, is it that sweet? I guess so. Say you can't sleep, baby, I know that's that me espresso. Move it up, down, left, right, oh, switch it up like Nintendo. Say you can't sleep, baby, I know that's that me espresso. Holy shit. Is it that sweet? I guess so. I'm working late, 'cause I'm a singer. Oh, you look so cute, wrapped around my finger. My twisted humor, make him laugh so often. My honeybee, come and get this pollen. Too bad your ex don't do it for you. Walked in and dream came true for you. Soft skin and not perfume for you. Yes, I know I'm melting to it for you. Yes, that morning coffee brewed for you. Yes, one touch and I'm brand new for you. Stupid. Now he's thinking about me every night. Oh, is it that sweet? I guess so. Say you can't sleep, baby, I know that's that me espresso. Move it up, down, left, right, oh, switch it up like Nintendo. Say you can't sleep, baby, I know that's that me espresso. Thinking about me every night. Oh, is it that sweet? I guess so. Say you can't sleep, baby, I know that's that me espresso. Move it up, down, left, right, oh, switch it up like Nintendo. Say you can't sleep, baby, I know that's that me espresso. Is it that sweet? I guess so. That's that me espresso.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Euronews. My name is Jeremy Fleming-Jones. I'm the editor-in-chief of EU Policy, which is a new strand of coverage that Euronews has started providing relating to the different bits of legislation, regulation that are characterized by the EU institutions. So we've been sending out more in-deep coverage of European affairs, and environment and energy is one of those areas which I'm delighted that we're launching our policy debates here today with. We will be doing many more of these debates, both here in our offices and around town. And today's debate, which will be moderated by Robert Hodgson, our senior energy and environment reporter, will be dealing with solar power and grid capacity. And I look forward to hearing the debate in just a moment. But to set the scene, Walburga Hemetsberger, the CEO of SolarPower Europe, is going to deliver some findings that SolarPower Europe have been compiling in a report, and that will set the scene for the debate, which we'll then hear afterwards. So please welcome Walburga onto the stage.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. I hope the mic is on. Yes. Thanks a lot, Jeremy. I'm particularly proud to be able to present this study, and I hope we'll see it in a moment. Yeah, I just need to click. I'm particularly proud to present the study Mission Solar 2040 to you today. Mission Solar 2040. Solar PV is on a mission to support Europe to become the most secure, the cleanest, and the most prosperous continent in the world. And this is only possible if we are embarking on a flexibility revolution, if we're embarking on a revolution, how we are managing the energy system in the future. Now, let me take you through what that means. Solar is booming across Europe. We have been starting back in 2004. That's a very small bit you see here, with 1 gigawatt installed. 4 years later, in 2008, we had 10 gigawatt installed. Now, in 2018, 10 years later, 100 gigawatt installed, and it only took us 4 more years in 2022 to have 200 gigawatt installed. Where are we today? We are at 269 gigawatt installed. This is an impressive growth. Now, let's look at it at a little bit of a bigger scale. You can see the 269 gigawatt that we have installed today. By 2030, we need to be at 750 gigawatt of solar installed. That is the goal that Europe has been setting itself. Now, the question is, how do we get from there? Where do we get from there? That's still the big question mark. And this is where our study comes in, because it depends on a number of different elements, and we've been looking into that. We've been working with some top-notch energy system modelers, Atelis. That's also some guys the European Commission is working with when it comes to scenario planning, when it comes to impact assessment. And we've been asking them to look at 3 scenarios. The 3 Mission Solar 2040 scenarios are, first, the solar as usual scenario. So solar as usual, how we defined that scenario was, we're going to add a little bit of flexibility, we're going to progress a little on electrification, but we're failing to implement all the great rules that European policymakers have been shaping in the last years. The second scenario is solar and flexibility. In this scenario, we are maximizing supply side flexibility. That means we're adding a lot of battery storage in particular to the system. We're also making sure that there is cross-border grids available. And the third and the last scenario we've been modeling is the solar plus flexibility plus electrification scenario. In this third scenario, we are also switching on electrification, switching on flexibility on the demand side, and that means adding a lot of electric vehicles, adding a lot of heat pumps, and adding electrolyzers. Now, with all of that, we have now been looking into comparing solar as usual with solar flexibility and electrification, so scenario 1 and scenario 3. And the results have been amazing. I'm going to take you through these stunning results now. So the first result was on the side of greenhouse gas emission reductions. 151 million tons of CO2 that is reduced each and every year as of 2030, if we're maximizing and if we're adding flexibility together with solar and together with electrification. Now, in 2040, that will be 555 million tons CO2 that we are reducing each and every year in the system. Annual reductions. So this is the first thing. The second benefit and the great result that we have found in the report is in terms of money. We will be saving 30 billion euros every year as of 2030 in the energy system. So the energy system costs us 30 billion euros less. That's in 2030. The 2040 number is a staggering 160 billion euros that we're saving, not just in total, but each and every year when it comes to our costs of the energy system. The third benefit is in terms of prices. The day-ahead power prices are reduced if you're adding flexibility and electrification to the equation, 25% in 2030. We pay 25% less on electricity costs in 2030, and that is increased to 33% less in 2040. Now I want to pause here a little bit, because we all know that we are facing a structural difficulty in Europe, which is very high energy costs. And the leaders coming in now in the new mandate will have to make sure that Europe remains competitive. Now, competitiveness has to do with electrification, it has to do with electricity prices. This is the results that you see when you're embarking on a flexibility revolution. Now, you might think, okay, this is all great, but how on earth would we make sure that solar will be further deployed big times, because this is what we need? Because low electricity prices, it doesn't sound like having a business case for investors in solar. Now, this is where flexibility comes in and makes the circle round. Because the fourth good news is that we are also increasing the business case for investors. And we have been looking into two factors, into two elements that show that the business case will be improved. So the first one is we have a problem today with curtailment in many countries already, where we've seen a very, very fast solar growth. When it comes to that curtailment, if we compare solar as usual scenario with a solar plus flexibility and electrification scenario, what we see is that the curtailment is halved. So minus 49%, half of the solar electrons are wasted in such a scenario. In 2040, even 66% of curtailment is reduced. Comparing again solar as usual and the solar plus flexibility plus electrification, so the solar flexibility revolution scenario. The second element we've been looking at is the solar capture price. So this is basically what solar investors can earn. And also there, we see that the business case is improved, because if we are comparing solar as usual to the flexibility revolution, what we see is that in 2030, investors will be earning 71% more, and in 2040, 54% more. So remember, this is still with electricity prices that are reduced 25, 33%. So it is a win-win for each and every one. Now, what does that mean? What does it do with the forecast that I have been showing in the very beginning? We're starting here again at the 269 gigawatt that we have installed today. 750, you remember, is the target that the European Commission, the European Union has set itself to reach by 2030. Now, with flexibility and electrification, we can go even beyond. We could reach more than 1.2 terawatts, so more than 1,200 gigawatt of solar by 2030 already. And we could even double that by 2040, reaching more than 2.4 terawatt or more than 2,400 gigawatt by 2040. That is stunning, isn't it? It needs the next steps to be taken. It needs the energy revolution, the flexibility revolution I was talking about, and that is making sure that solar is surrounded with grids, is surrounded with storage, and is surrounded with a lot of electrification. There is a great opportunity for new policymakers, and they're all looking for solutions in order to get European to that competitive edge that we all want to see it, that makes sure that we have a secure Europe and that we have a clean Europe. So what does it need? What are the next steps? And that's all summarized in this slide. So first, we need to set new targets. We need to set targets for renewables, and those targets need to also be complemented with targets on storage, targets on grids, and not just for 2030, but also for 2040. Now, we already have renewable targets for 2030, we all know them, but what we do not have yet is flexibility targets. So we need to have those renewable targets complemented. And the reason for it is something that is very much underlining. That is, if you look at the NECPs, at the National Energy and Climate Plans, where when we analyze those plans, we see higher ambition on solar, which is great, but we do not see the same ambition when it comes to flexibility. And this is exactly where we're having bottlenecks more and more so. And what we need to also make sure is that these flexibility, these flexibility, the flexibility goals are able to steer policymakers. So we see that it has a steering effect, and we need to have those being lined out. We need to also make sure that we are improving the energy system modeling capacities. We know that there are rules that grid operators need to do some planning and modeling, but what we need is making sure that these modeling capacities and assessing capacities are improved. We need to have the European Commission looking into maybe new tools of higher quality in order to help member states, grid operators and regulators to improve the assessment of all those needs. I would like to highlight in particular regulators, because we do think that ACER has a specific role to play and needs to be supported with some improved tools when it comes to planning, because in the end we are looking at a huge change in the energy system, and we need to make sure that that any planning, any failures in planning are not putting that at risk. So we need to make sure that planning is top-notch. And ultimately, what would help in the next mandate is to have an energy agency, a European energy agency, which could help in this planning exercise. Third, we need to unlock investments in flexibility across the energy system that is decentralized, large-scale, but also seasonal. For that, a lot can be done by just implementing the rules that we already have. But in addition, we will need some more help when it comes, for example, to hybridization, when it comes to co-locating solar and storage, solar storage and wind. And the fourth point is we need to adopt a European electrification plan and investment plan. We are asking European leaders to do that very quickly in the first 100 days of the new mandate. And that needs to make sure that we have a goal we're working towards on electrification by 2040, 50% at least. At the moment, we're stalling at somewhere 22%. So that needs to accelerate big times. We also need to make sure that the national energy and climate plans are funded, so that there's funding which is not only coming from the European level but also from the national level in order to support those plans. And then at the European level, we need to make sure that the multi-annual framework that will be discussed in the next couple of years is funding those investment needs that we have. And ultimately, we are looking at a huge change, and that also means a change in how we look at security in Europe. So all of that needs to be taken up in a new European energy security strategy that is taking account of the changes that we need to see. So thanks very much. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion and handing over to you again, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Walburga. Lots of food for thought there about the next mandate, and a good scene setter for the debate to come. Please, I think you can find the report that Burgi has just been talking about online at SolarPower Europe, so you can download it there. And now, Robert, if you'd like to come up and introduce the panel for the discussion.
I'll start by introducing myself. Jeremy already has. I'm the Senior Environment and Energy Reporter with Euronews' new policy unit. I won't go any further than that for the time being. I'll start bringing up the guests, if I may. So one by one. Juan, can you come up first, please? This is Juan Rivier Abbad, Head of Renewables Regulation at Iberdrola, which is an electricity producer, I think, active in over 30 countries, and it bills itself as one of the world's leaders in renewable energy. Okay, we got that right. Francois Bode, please. Strategy lead at the EU Agency for Cooperation of Energy Regulators, ACER, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, broadly speaking, is there to help national authorities monitor energy markets and implement EU policy, roughly speaking. Stefano Grassi, please, from the Commission here. Head of Cabinet to EU Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson. So I dare say he's going to be the target for a lot of questions from the panel and possibly from the audience too. And lastly, Sonia Tuig, Secretary General of ENTSO-E, which is the European network of transmission system operators, which are the companies that run the high voltage cables connecting power stations to towns and cities. After that, they hand over to distributors. So obviously an essential part of the picture. I'm going to take a seat now and start proceedings. I should just ask Juan to be careful because you're perilously close to the edge of the stage. I wouldn't want you to fall off in the middle of the... Okay. I might, but that's part of the entertainment of the whole thing. Right, so Europe's flexibility revolution, taking the next step in the energy transition is what we're talking about here. I don't need to tell you that rooftop solar panels are basically ubiquitous now in Europe, more in some places than others. And we can expect a lot more, judging by what we've just heard, in the coming years. Let's not forget that we also have a growing number of wind turbines coming online as well, and plans to drastically ramp up production offshore and onshore. So the integrity of the grid is going to be ever more important. But that's on the supply side of renewable electricity, but that of course has to be balanced with the demand side. And we have growing numbers of electric vehicles. We have hopes for rapid rollout of heat pumps across Europe in the switch from gas-fired boilers. But one question at the moment, which I'm sure we're going to be discussing, is whether there's the right balance at the moment, whether the deployment of renewables and the increasing demand for electricity are in lockstep, or is one trying to go faster than the other, which is going to be problematic possibly. So we have a panel here of distinguished guests who each have their own specialist and expert knowledge of their areas. And what we want to talk about here is basically what we need to do to ensure that the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy doesn't stall or hit a brick wall. So with that said, I'll start giving the panel the opportunity to speak. So the operation of electricity grids is governed by EU market regulations, and I think we know who we're going to be talking to here. Where grid capacity is insufficient to accommodate electricity from wind turbines and solar panels, it can lead to a situation where you have to shut down solar panels or wind turbines, which is a wasteful and often expensive situation. The electricity industry group Eurelectric, I don't know if there's anyone from Eurelectric here today. I would have hoped so, but never mind. Estimated that we need to double investment in power grids to 67 billion euros a year, every year from now to 2050. That was in a report issued last month, which is something like 0.4% of Europe's GDP. We're not talking about small figures here. ACER, of course, follows the electricity markets as closely as anybody, so I'd like to start by asking Francois where he sees the most urgent need for development or investment, and importantly, whether we're making optimal use of existing infrastructure.
Thank you. Quite a broad question indeed. Can you hear me well? Okay, good. My key message here would be to say efficiency first also applies to grid. As we saw in the previous presentation, we have huge investments coming in renewables, in flexibility, and in grids. And we want to do that in a way that is not too costly for our citizens and our companies. What does efficiency first mean for grids in practice? We see really 3 steps. The first one is to use what we have today to its full extent. There is a kind of technical target in the regulation that says you need to offer 70% of network capacity for trade across bidding zones. Today we are at 30 to 50. So if we can go to 70, we already increase quite a bit the ability to exchange renewables, wind and solar. The second element is we don't have to build only new lines. We can rely on innovative grid technologies. And a report issued last week claims that we could increase grid capacity by 20 to 40% with a cost which is lower than building new lines. So let's look at that, because then we increase capacity at a lower cost. And finally, still with those, we will need quite some investments in new grids. The question is, we need to improve our planning process to make sure we don't build any useless grid. So we need to improve the planning process in terms of assumptions and transparency, so that public authorities, when they face those risks, are able to assess them properly. And I think I've used my 2 minutes already.
Very well done. We'll return to some of the points you mentioned. The efficiency, I think, is something that's going to be a buzzword, not only in the area of grid, the use of grids, but let's move on. First of all, the EU set, as we've already heard, ambitious renewable targets. We've heard we need more. 2040 targets missing, for example. But the one we have already, 42.5% at least by 2030, is something not much less than doubling what we have at the moment. And in the electricity sector, that's going to be increasing the share of renewable electricity to something like 70% or approaching 70% by the end of this decade. I think it's about 40% at the moment. I'm prepared to be corrected there. But the thing is, with this increase in renewable electricity coming online, we need to match, as we mentioned before, supply with demand. So electric cars are becoming ever more present, but there's also the issue of electrifying houses, heating, switching to heat pumps, and as well as businesses, and ramping up hydrogen production as another way to use this envisaged increase in renewable capacity. So I'm going to ask Juan, as a head of, as we said, a leading renewable energy company, can you give us the view from the power generation side on this idea of whether or not we're moving quickly enough to electrify?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I would say from the supply side, we are doing whatever we can, and I think we're performing well. We are deploying renewables at a big space, and photovoltaics is doing great. We had the previous European Commission very much focused on helping this deployment, and they have been a very good work on terms of permitting, how to accelerate. I mean, for obvious reasons, we had to step on the accelerator for deployment to get rid of the gas somehow, or to get rid quicker from the gas. So that was a great job, and we have just focused a lot on the supply side. Then they have discovered that, the focus has just moved to grids, which is the next bottleneck. So we've been deploying very quickly, and it has worked pretty well. Then we have the grids there, and I think the European Commission has really very much realized the urgency of deploying grids, of enabling the market to work, and that's great. But what I'm missing from my point of sight is all the demand side. Of course, we heard about electrification of transport, industry, households, but for me, this is not happening fast enough. And for several reasons, I would say. First of all, because grids also impact, the lack of grids also impact the possibilities of going electric. I'm talking here, of course, especially for industries who are asking to go electric and then face a grid bottleneck. And so wait 5 years. Come on, we cannot wait 5 years to go electric for the industry. So that's very important. So that's it. And the second part is a question of economic signals. So when we have that and we ask people to go electric, we ask them to pay the electricity bill. And for years now, governments have used the electricity bill to add up a lot of costs there that are not really electricity. Before, it was just something that it was just, self-contained, and whatever you could do, it would work. Everybody paid for electricity. But now we're talking about competing between electricity and other energy vectors like gas or oil for cars. And if we ask consumers to switch to electricity, but at the same time we tell them that you're going to have to pay for I don't know how many industrial, social, environmental policies, that they don't have to do that if they stay with gas, if they stick with gas and oil. I mean, it's going to be hard to make them do the change. So for me, that's the two main issues there.
Okay.
Grids and economic signals.
There is an incoming policy time bomb which might help people, persuade people to shift from heating with gas to electricity, but we'll come back to that later. It's just to keep you excited over there. ENTSO-E, transmission system operators. The Commission presented an action plan on grids in November, where they noted again another staggering figure that 584 billion euros in investment will be needed to 2030, by which time transmission capacity across borders and electricity consumption are set to... no, the transmission capacity should double. I think the target is 15% of each country's generation capacity should be transmissible by that date. Consumption is expected to increase to 60%, although we've just heard that some doubts about whether we're actually on track for that. And the Council just last month, the end of last month, asked the Commission to press ahead with its own conclusions on the need to develop grids. So Sonia, as the Secretary General of the body representing transmission system operators in Europe, are we heading in the right direction, or so far are these plans and Council conclusions just talk?
Well, we have great ambition here in Europe, and I think you can see by SolarPower Europe's presentation today, there's huge scope to deliver a decarbonized Europe by 2050, if not sooner. What we're doing today as operators of the system is keeping still the secure supply that everyone wants to maintain, but also changing at the same time. And you can see this huge transition doesn't come without huge challenges. And so the Commission's leadership, I want to thank Stefano and Commissioner Simpson for the political leadership to take on the question of grids, because of course we can take on more solar generation, more wind, more offshore, but we need the infrastructure to bring it to shore or to bring it to the consumer and for all of us to benefit from a decarbonized power system. So this is the first thing. Are we doing enough? I think we're doing a lot. It'll be a question of history telling us whether we did enough, right? But I think what is important is to say is that we have a lot of focus on implementation now, a lot of focus on action plans, but also conversations with the right people at the right time, which maybe was not so the learning from our last 20 years trying to deploy renewables quicker and faster. The more that we can talk to each other, and especially the operators, the regulators, but also our political policymakers, is important, because we don't have a lot of time. And the figures presented today to get to 2030, well, that's just tomorrow, and 2040 around the corner, and then 2050. Well, we can dream that it's far away, but it's not. And I think that part of it is difficult for us all to understand, is how much time we have remaining, and also how much we can do with that time. So it is about least regrets in terms of the investment being made. It's important to make the investment right, because as my colleague said here, that it should be that we are all paying for this investment, and therefore it should be with a view to being affordable, sustainable, and that's the important mandate now, I think, going forward with the new Commission, is the affordability of the energy policy that we all wish to have and have. So as operators of the system, we fundamentally believe in, as I said, the decarbonization, the electrification. We recently submitted to Acer the new network code, the new rule book on connecting in demand flexibility. So we believe in flexibility across the full supply chain, both at the generation side or supply side with solar, with wind, of course within the grid, because you can unlock flexibility already today. We know that, and we are looking at the innovations that can be already deployed, but also for the supply end or the demand end, whether we can have you, me, and all the industrials out there also contributing our to this decarbonization objective. So it is a very ambitious plan, but it is already underway.
Okay, before we come back later to some more of the technicalities of how we're going to pay for the various developments that people are asking for, let me turn to the Commission now, and Stefano. We've heard some fairly, clear demands for, targets, another legally binding target for renewables for 2040, and separate targets for storage and flexibility more generally. With the Commission at the moment, I mean, we're speaking to you at a moment when the Commission's in something of a period of flux, so we're kind of putting you on the spot here. But what can we realistically expect, would you say, from the next Commission, or maybe from the last few months of the existing Commission, and then the next Commission, to address the issues that have been raised so far?
Thank you and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to be with the Association of the Year, the SolarPower Europe, once again. I think first we should stress for a moment how amazing is the SolarPower Europe came up with a report on flexibility. Because if you think about it for a second, this is emblematic of the challenges and the moment we live in our clean energy transition. SolarPower Europe, hope I'm not saying something not known by everybody, is an association of the solar sector, of the generators of solar electricity. And this report has a very clear message that what were the success or the failure of a solar rollout in Europe in the coming decades will be decided is not on the enabling conditions or the intrinsic conditions of this technology. It's about the environment in which this technology is embedded. And if you remember, when we started 5 years ago, all our Green Deal journey, our reflection was how much and how fast we can go in replacing fossil fuel with clean technologies. What are the enabling conditions? What are the targets? What are the incentives and the financing in order to install more and more and more at a certain pace generation? What we have learned over these 5 years is that what matters is exactly the context. It is, first of all, what is around this generation, the grids, the flexibility, and this is the debate we are having this year also in Council. It is also, this context changes depending on the share of renewables you have in your system. One thing is to plan an electricity system when you have 10% of renewables. One thing will be to plan it when you have 70 or 80% of electricity coming from renewables. And it's a completely different story. So what is the mindset challenge that we have to do in the next Commission is to place ourselves in this. What is important is not just to look at the single technologies, each of them, and the conditions for faster rollout, is to look at the environment, the whole economy around them, and to look at how a system works when you have a large majority of electricity coming from renewables. To be telegraphic, we have come a long way, I think, in this Commission, also to start a reflection on these, let's say, contextual conditions, on this renewables environment. The Grids Action Plan is one case. The electricity market design reform is another one, where we have specific provisions on flexibility, on national indicative targets, and the possibility to create at national level a sort of mechanism for procuring non-fossil flexibility. There is a lot also on decentralized production of electricity, on infrastructure for charging points, and the conditions to facilitate EV rollout. And we are, I think, hopefully very soon closing also the network code for demand reduction. But there are two areas there I see issues before going to the recommendations. One is that Walburga was stressing the fact that for the solar sector there will not be a problem of profitability in the next decades. Where I do see the problem of missing money is on flexibility. Where I do not see the business case is exactly on demand response, is exactly on the storage and the grid storage deployment. This, I think, is the key point to address. The funding and creating a business case, inviting industry to become a player in demand response. There, I think, I see a first problem. The second, she was also pointing to the issue of declining electricity prices, which is very important. But all our analysis by 2040 indicates that while the share of energy costs, energy system costs due to purchase of energy will be reduced significantly because we move to renewables, the share of system costs, the grids, the infrastructure, all additional costs will increase significantly. I've even noted down, to be precise today, from 2.7 to 4.9%. It's almost doubling. And this creates, once again, not only an issue of funding flexibility, but also the way we cover this cost of energy system cost. I finish telegraphically. Many of these ideas, I think, will be listened to very attentively by those who will prepare the next program, where I will give a different recommendation to Walburga and the colleagues, is that I will maybe not see a plan for electrification in the first 100 years, because I do think there is a moment where we need to settle things. We have a lot of reforms that just entered into force. The right moment to have this reflection is when we will need to set a 2040 target for decarbonization, and this has implication across the economy, has clearly implication for the energy system, the electrification in Europe, and maybe that's the moment where I think they can once again push their recommendations. Thank you.
Can I ask when we might see the 2040 proposal for
But you
emission
have to
reduction?
ask to the new president. Certainly.
Not in the next few weeks, then. Let's talk about national energy and climate plans quickly, because, as we know, the deadline for submission of the final versions of the national energy and climate plans, which all governments have to submit, outlining how they intend to achieve the 2030 targets that have already been set, amongst which is, of course, the renewable energy target. How is it looking from the Commission's point of view at the moment? I mean, I know you're not going to be checking the plans personally, but
but we keep a very close eye on it, because we consider this a very important exercise now where we have completed the regulatory framework, to see how much member states are owning this framework and turning into concrete investment plans and concrete plans. And it's a very good signal for investor and for market operators. I think it's good that everyone is taking the exercise seriously, and I think we will have most likely most of the plans by the deadline or around the summer, so we will be able to produce our analysis by the end of the year. This will give elements for all these new initiatives that will be necessary in the next year. We see, I will say, we are on track, and positive news on renewables, a bit less on energy efficiency, and I see that other parts of the plans are also taken seriously. The investment part, many of them are looking at CCUS, many of them are looking at hydrogen. There is also a bit of an integration of systems approach that is very positive. So I think it will be a good exercise.
okay. I mean, I'm sure everyone on the panel has closely scrutinized the various drafts that we've seen of the National Energy and Climate Plans, NECPs. Can I ask for any comments? Is there anything that you see that meets your expectations, or is there any glaring omissions in the overall picture of what countries are planning to do at the moment? This could.
Maybe
Yeah.
if I may, Robert. So I think personally the plans are there for a very strong basis for how we plan the future. So therefore the national plans are an important input into ENTSO-E's European network plans. So it is vital that the quality and the monitoring of them is just as good as the work that's done to produce them in the first place. So we do also ask for leadership and how they're being monitored and also how they're being rolled out. It's of course a plan is no good unless it can be implemented, and therefore there may be some leadership needed throughout the lifetime of the plan and when it's being delivered. So it's very important, we think, that that the actual learning from the last 5-10 years about NECPs is learned for the future, but also because it determines how we plan Europe's power system, Europe's network, and what we can expect from it. And I think the importance of the energy transition is understood now in each member state, in each country, but it's also a question of have they considered how to bring in that national plan to fruition, and that part of it may not be as mature in every country as we see. Yeah.
Okay, Juan, you have any comments on the overall picture of national plans?
I just wanted to add that, I mean, it's national energy economic plans are very important. They provide you a picture of how the government sees every country in a few years. In a lot of places, I mean, at the moment, in a lot of countries, they have put forward some objective of renewables that need to have this electrification happen, because if not, we're gonna head to a disaster. And the problem is that they have been focusing for so long on renewables targets that the rest is much more fuzzy. And we need it. It's just trying to walk. You know, we have 3 legs and we have it only growing 1 leg, and so whatever it is might not be able to walk. So we really need to do that, and to have credibility on the rest of the plants, not only renewables, just all the other. Because if not, the part which is credible, which is renewables, might not reach the target because we have the missing pieces, and it's gonna fall down on itself.
Okay, we heard also about costs, and I think you mentioned that the system costs are going to increase from 2.7% to 4 point something. Well, the actual generation costs of electricity are falling. Obviously, we have no marginal cost for wind or for the sunshine. On the issue of costs, I mean, ultimately, it's the end consumers who are going to pay for this transition. There's no way around that. And one way or another, the cost of new power lines are going to have to be factored into electricity bills. I mean, we saw during the energy crisis of 2022 that the cost of electricity rocketed, you know, even when there were periods when most of the generation was wind or solar, which was a windfall for companies like Iberdrola, I think it would be fair to say, because your marginal cost didn't increase, but the cost of electricity tracked the cost of gas. That prompted a sort of, you know, a quick reform proposal from the Commission, which is now completed. Do we think, and I'm going to ask Francois this first of all, do you think that the regulation around pricing is now fit for purpose? Is it you know, sufficient to provide price signals for investment in renewables and grids, and, as you stressed, the importance of shielding consumers from you know, volatile or high prices?
Why do we need prices in the first place? We need prices so that everyone in the system adjusts to a very volatile system. As we've mentioned, we have so many moving parts. If we miss electrification, prices go down. If we miss flexibility, price become more volatile, and so on. We need good prices so that everyone can adjust to that, and that can become an opportunity for everyone, because tomorrow if I have an electric vehicle and prices are free half of the day, I drive for free. So we need good prices. Do we need to change the pricing mechanisms? I'm not sure. We had very long discussions about that. The 2022 crisis was a very difficult crisis. We were really short on gas, so we also needed to bring in consumption reduction that was not too painful for people, so that we would save gas and avoid a freezing winter where the EU would have been in big trouble. So prices can play a role in that, in a way that you make sure vulnerable consumers are protected. So from that perspective, I'm not sure we need to review the wholesale prices. we need to think about how we orchestrate that whole investment wall that we have in a number of sectors, flexibility, solar, and so on. And for that, we may need complement to those wholesale prices that could be subsidy schemes or longer term contracts that enable investors to have confidence that tomorrow, if they build a battery, they'll have enough revenue.
Well, let's try and get a concrete example of what an incentive to invest in flexibility solutions might be. I mean, there are projects afoot at the moment to put large battery storage facilities on the grid. So when there's too much solar power or wind power being generated in excess of demand at the time, you can store it for later. I mean, but we also have the biggest growth market in batteries at the moment is in electric vehicles, I think it would be fair to say. And when the deployment of electric vehicles and charging infrastructure began to be ramped up and the Commission started setting itself targets for, to encourage the take-up of electric vehicles, as far as I'm aware, most of the electric vehicles being sold at the moment aren't capable of two-way charging. So they can take electricity from the grid, but they can't feed it back in. Is this a big missed opportunity? I mean, do we not have to move quickly to ensure that they can act? Cars spend 22, 23 hours a day sitting motionless. They could be plugged in. Is this not a no-brainer for putting flexibility on grid? And why isn't it happening? I don't know if anyone wants to.
Maybe, Robert, to react to that. So, I mean, one thing that we also need to say with, and I think Walburga explained, is that flexibility has got many dimensions. It's short, medium, long term, and then the value of it is dependent on what it's being used to deploy. So storage is very much in that area. So there's, as we said, with the EVs, it can be more related to very short-term response. But then for a power system with very large consumption, it may be looking at large-scale hydro as a type of sort of mechanism for flexibility. I think the question is how is this industry valuable, or what value does it place on those services? This is a debate that needs to be had. We have a question about, is the market price correct? But now we need to know, is the flexibility price correct? So we have to price in flexibility now. We also have to understand that as the industry transitions away from fossil fuel, it still has what I call classical mindset, which is, of course, that it needs to be paid for capacity, and therefore it wants also to be reimbursed to stay in an industry that, of course, it needs to be there once the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Okay, so therefore we need a type of industry that has a balanced portfolio available to it, otherwise we don't have megawatts on the system. So you need to also ensure that all parts of that supply end are getting the value from it. And if they don't, then you will have loss of supply, you will have shortages, and you will have a system at a perilous edge of not being able to provide to its consumer. So the value chain and the value proposition is quite important here. We can have a very academic discussion about single marginal price and wholesale prices, but at the end of the day, the way in which money will be made and profits and the way in which this industry will work will depend on what value we place and how that signal is placed to the person who can deliver it to us.
But in real world terms, to put it in a way that a layman might understand, an electric car owner, for example, do you foresee a situation, and this can be for anyone, where car owners can actually use the flexibility they can offer as a separate revenue stream, in the same way that solar panel owners can feed power into the grid and make money that way? You're nodding, Francois, so perhaps you can.
Yeah, it just, I think, in terms of electric vehicles, for me, I mean, if only we could make them charge at the right moment, that would be really, for the moment, enough. Let's say afterwards how they can do from vehicle to grid and provide services. But I just wanted to add that's very important, because you have raised some different issues. I mean, when we talk about the electricity system, I know that everybody thinks about the price, the spot price which is there. But I think it's very important here to understand, for everybody to understand, that the electricity market is a very complex machinery that goes much more beyond the spot price that is just published on the newspapers. And it goes not only in complexity in real time, but also in much upstream and downstream in terms of time. And you say Iberdrola made a lot of money when the price was rocketing. Actually, in Europe, we lose money. We earn less money than before, basically because we not only produce, but we also sell the energy to our customers. And the energy was already sold. And actually, we produce less than what we sold to our customers. And so actually, we had to go to the market to buy expensive energy to supply to our customers. And we were hedged because we had, our own generation. Most of it not with gas, because if it was with gas, then it was as costly that buying it in the market. So we didn't market, and we have long-term renewable PPAs. We can sell some energy 10 years ago. And now we are selling energy maybe for in next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So talking about the electricity price in the spot price is very simplistic. It doesn't show the complexity of what's happening. And also this links also to what Sonia was telling us about all the economic signals that we need to provide to the flexibility, to the networks. How do we charge that to the customers? How everything is built out till the electricity bill is sent to the customers. It's very, very complex and very, very different than the way on how you build it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know when I was first introduced to the electricity market when I moved to Brussels 10 years ago, it's fearsomely complex. But there's a growing trend towards renewable energy producers now using power purchase agreements to sell electricity in advance at a fixed price to people who want to green their businesses by using green electricity. That's one of the sort of models. Now, I suppose what you're suggesting is that from the point of view of these producers, it will be good to have some more regulatory certainty and a system whereby that kind of price volatility is less likely to happen. Would that be correct?
Yes. I mean, I prefer to have very stable rules, and I love market because also I don't want to have a PPA signed for 15 years, and then in 4 years' time, I have my cost, I have my energy, and then I cannot produce it because the system doesn't allow me to produce it simply because there is no room. Even if I've sold it, maybe there is no room in terms of the system because there is not enough grids or not enough flexibility or not enough demand for everybody. So for me, this certainty is going to be great. And the more certainty you have in the regulation, the more you will be able to invest in all parts of the system, which is also grids. We're going to have also people entering PPAs, because when you have a people entering a PPA, also a customer, they want to make sure that the deal they are making makes sense not only today, but also in 10 years' time. And so if they think the rules are going to change in the middle, they might not want to sign the PPA. They say, I don't feel comfortable.
That's a message I hear every time there's a discussion about investment plans and future development. We're running out of time, so I'm going to throw in two questions very quickly. We were talking about the need to electrify as well as one of the key points to integrating more renewable energy into the grid. And one of the things that's always mentioned is heat pumps. Now, I think, Juan, you certainly said that you don't feel enough is being done to push people in the direction of electrification. But from 2027, the emissions trading system, which, as everyone here probably knows, is already forcing electricity generators to, well, not forcing, but encouraging electricity generators to switch to renewables because they have to pay for every ton of CO2 they emit. That is going to be applied to buildings and transport from 2027 via the fuel. So householders are going to have a cost now added from 2027 if they stick to gas as a heating fuel. And this I think it's probably fair to say this is not many people, members of the public, are actually aware of this happening. And do you think, maybe I should ask the Commission, because the next Commission at least is going to have to handle this, the PR side of this thing when it kicks in. Do you think people are ready for this? Do you think that the impact is going to be dramatic, or have the safeguards been put in to protect people from a sudden spike in the cost of petrol and gas for heating homes?
Well, I think certainly will be an inflection point. It may become very controversial. In our analysis, most of the burden will not be sustained by citizens or final consumers, but mainly by intermediaries and traders who will have to pay for the carbon tax. And in countries like Germany, which have similar forms of carbon taxation, I think this has not disrupted the market. And number three, in terms of safeguards, 1 year before, we will also activate the Climate Social Fund, which will provide incentives and financial support for consumer who want to switch to more energy efficient solutions or to cleaner solutions. So I think what we will see also going forward is a new wave of programs and subsidies from member states, also with the help of the Climate Social Fund to help the transition exactly for the most vulnerable. As I said, inflection point to monitor. I think the safeguards is there and is not a measure aimed at penalizing the elderly or the most vulnerable consumers who have more difficulties in switching to newer and cleaner technologies.
But would protecting the most vulnerable, which obviously is built into the policy framework, be sufficient to placate perhaps the middle classes who might also be angry about seeing their bills rocket? Are we talking about rocketing bills here, by the way, or?
No, I don't think we will be looking at rocketing bills. I think also in general the gas prices in the gas market after 26 will be bound to decrease further because there will be a more abundant supply of LNG over the market. I think the market will be for a while stabilized and the prices will reduce. So this will also help. And I think everyone is aware that the social dimension and aspect of the transition is a key one. So I expect that every member states with the support of the EU funding will take appropriate measures.
Thank you. Okay, I had one more question about hydrogen, but I think it's probably time to throw things to the floor now and see if anyone wants to ask any questions. If it's about hydrogen, all the better, but it doesn't have to be. And perhaps Walburga would like to. Do you have anything you'd like to add at this point in response to what's been said?
Yeah, very happy to maybe add one or two thoughts to it. So first of all, because we've been discussing about flexibility, what kind of flexibility, I think the question is more about how can we unleash that flexibility, and then the market would show whether that's electric vehicles or whether that's batteries, home batteries, or whether that's big battery packs at the grid connection point. And how to unleash, that's part of another debate, I think. But for example, auctions should more look into auctioning solar plus storage, where there's different ways how you can unleash revenue generation for storage, which is not happening yet. Capacity mechanisms, or also just markets where storage can participate. I think this is already a big chunk of how we can unleash flexibility. Then another point I noted, talking about national energy and climate plans, because there was a very upbeat discussion. Indeed, when it comes to solar, just looking through the solar lens, we have seen a great improvement in ambitions nationally when it comes to solar, but we're not there yet. So in order to get to these 750 gigawatt, the European Commission's plan, we are at somewhere 88% at the moment. So there still needs to be a last big push in order to get there. But what we do not see in most member states is indeed having plans when it comes to improving grids, when it comes to improving storage, flexibility more generally. So this is clearly missing in order to have that match between demand and supply. And then the before last point, because indeed, thanks for that feedback, Stefano, that we might not see an electrification action plan in the first 100 days. I do hope it's not that much more time that it needs, and I do hope that we will see 2040 targets soon, because we need to move fast. And I think this is another thing, we do not have time. And thanks for the comment, Sonja, that in order to not miss that time, that urgency that we have, we need to continue the dialogue that we have already established very well, and need to see what kind of innovations we can bring to the system and how we can move much more quickly.
Okay, we covered quite a lot of ground, but there's still plenty more ground we could have covered. There's a whole issue of digitalization, for example, of the grids and smart meters and monitoring real-time electricity use. Maybe that's for another day. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to put to the panel? We can always rely on a journalist.
Maybe just picking up on your point about digitization. I mean, if the grid flexibility requires such a revolution in digitization, are there any concerns about privacy or cybersecurity that may arise as a result of that? I wonder if any of the panelists have any comments on that.
Well, we have a code for even cybersecurity now in Europe. So we actually have some rules and some best practice that we wish all the distribution operators and transmission operators wish to uphold. So therefore, connecting into the grid does have to be cyber protected and so on. So we are of course to ensure that the network that we have is secure and available for us at all time, and not to be sabotaged or taken by third parties, let's say. So this is an important part, and I think energy security and the resilience of it in terms of cyber is an important aspect. So setting rules and setting practice here that needs to be followed is just as important as the need to decarbonize itself. If you decarbonize to a grid or to an infrastructure that is not secure, then it itself will fall down. So it is important, as you say. Yeah.
Francois?
And maybe to complement on cybersecurity, we have some specific rules because electricity grids are different in 3 key aspects. Real-time requirements. So you need to feed in real time exactly as much electricity that you take out. So you cannot afford, like when you send an email, there is an overload, you wait for 10 minutes and it goes. The second one is cascading effect. If you lose one line quickly, you lose another one, and then you go to blackout. And finally, you have legacy tools. So you build a line or a substation for 40 years. So you need to ensure cybersecurity of that for 40 years, where your smartphone in your pocket lasts 2, maybe 3. So that is also going to be a challenge, and that's why there is this specific network code on cybersecurity.
Please, lady in the yellow.
I'm Amelie Snijders. I work for Fleischmann Hillard in their energy policy team. I was hoping for a bit of elaboration on the improved energy system planning. I know it was mentioned as a recommendation, and then Aisha mentioned that we need to improve our assumptions and transparency. But could you elaborate a bit more on what specific improvements need to be made, and whether that's something that ACER can address independently, or whether you need more guidance from the European Commission there?
Regarding planning, from a high-level perspective first, we see massive renewable targets. We have talked a lot about solar. For offshore wind, on top, we'll build 300 gigawatts of offshore wind. That's the 4th-generation fleet of Germany and the Netherlands. We're building them, again, offshore. So the first comment is, we believe if we're going this route, we need closer European coordination in terms of planning. Because as mentioned, the consumer that will consume the electrification may be in another country, so you need to coordinate all the way. We need better transparency in planning of the grids to be able to better understand what are the risks. Why is this line needed or not? In which case will it or not be needed? And we need to work on scenarios together with the whole electricity and energy sector to be able to say, those are realistic futures. What is the future 40 years from now? I have no idea, but can we define 3-4 scenarios we broadly agree on? And can we improve them compared to what we have today? And then those become the basis. What we do practically is we're working with NSOE on the so-called 10-year network development plan to improve this planning process.
Okay. We've just hit the wall in terms of time, so I'm going to ask my speakers if we can have a few comments. And I think to make a very clumsy sort of segue, is the energy transition obviously is based on the deployment of renewables to replace fossil fuels. And now we've just heard that we might be reaching a point where it's getting difficult to deploy more renewables without increasing the flexibility of the grids and the storage and you know, the demand side of things. Can I just ask quickly, have we already hit a brick wall in terms of deployment, or are we very close to it if we don't dramatically start addressing the flexibility side of things? And yeah, I mean, how do you see things developing in the next 5-10 years? Oh, I'm going to have to limit you to about 30 seconds, possibly.
I'm going to reply first, Brett, because it's like the Grand National. You have all these sort of little walls that you have to climb over. So I wouldn't see one brick wall, but I see very small ones that you have to jump over.
Lots of small.
And then you eventually win the race. So I think the point is that there's going to be challenges. There is a challenge because we're in a transition. We're moving out of something that's been like over 100, 150 years in the making, and now it has to leapfrog into a fully decarbonized system. So there's going to be those challenges. But I do believe that the industry has good problems, but also good solutions. And the technologies, grid technologies, innovation does have to play the role here. We are very ambitious offshore. Thankful to the Commission for its ambition to utilize the sea basins of Europe. And we are therefore, and we're setting that scene across the world, right? This is a European solution. So, thank you.
Stefano, would it have been better to have built up the grid and flexibility and renewables in tandem?
I don't think the grids and our network are today a bottleneck or a barrier, but we have the early signs that they may become an issue. And I want to point you to two things that happened over the weekend to give you also a background of what are the challenges. We had over the weekend an incident and a protracted blackout in an area of the Western Balkans, affecting also one member state, Croatia, which, for the information I have at this stage, Sonia will tell me more, is also due in part to the heat wave and the high temperatures and aging grids in part of the Western Balkans. So not the European grids itself, but again, climate adaptation of the grids is also one big issue we need to think of, and investment in rebuilding or modernizing the grids. Second point, another wave of attacks in Ukraine against energy generation. Almost 80% of non-nuclear generation is off. Up to 12 hours of rotating blackouts to maintain the supply in some areas. The only strategy the Ukraine can have to survive the winter is to decentralize production of electricity with small generators, solar panels everywhere in hospital, critical infrastructure, and we are going to try to help them as much as we can, because this can be a laboratory of how a decentralized system, remember, they can be target for attacks, terrorist attacks, military attacks, and I hope that we will have the support of SolarPower Europe in this effort to repair and rebuild a decentralized system in Ukraine.
Okay. Francois, any?
Very quickly,
Please.
we see some countries like the Netherlands where already the network is close to be a bottleneck, and we see there are signs for things to come. Even in the future with ambitious grid deployment, we will see grids as being constraints. So we also need to work on locational signals, building renewables where it makes more sense, building electrolyzers where it makes more sense.
Okay, Juan?
I agree with Francois on the fact that there are countries closer to hitting a brick wall than others. And we're seeing that also in terms of curtailments, zero prices in the networks everywhere. So we really need to hurry in terms of electrification and flexibility. The good part is that we are not talking. I mean, we heard about before about we had 10% renewables, so and now we are talking about 70% renewables. But when we were talking about 10%, we didn't know where we were going, and we were more or less afraid. And especially TSOs were very afraid of reaching. I remember in Spain, more than 3% wind won't happen. The system will be unstable. Now with 70%, we know the solutions. So we want to reach 70%, but we know what are the solutions. It's just a question of applying them and deploying them. So we know the grids, we know the electrification, the flexibility that we need, and all the models tells us that it works. We just have to put it there.
Okay, good to finish on a positive note. Let's get on with it. Thank you very much. A round of applause for the panel, please. And with that, I'll hand back to Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Robert, and to our panel for their very interesting and engaging discussion on the topics, which we'll be keeping a close eye on. And you can, as I say, continue to read about this issue and others on the policy strands that we're writing about now. You'll be able to find some flyers with our details of our newsletters and where to find us online as well. If you join us afterwards in a networking lunch just next door, and you can continue the conversation and learn more about Mission Solar Report and chat to all of the contributors this afternoon. So please do join us next door for a bite to eat.
Thank you. Please.